Hi everyone and welcome to AP Help 101. So this week we're going to be talking about the AP Biology test. And I actually just recently took this test, so I'll be able to give you my personal input on how to help study for this test. So one of the first things to remember is that changes have been made to the test. And I believe they were made 2013. I believe that's when they were made. So the first thing is new curriculum. Now, that doesn't mean that the entire class was changed, but rather what information was emphasized and how things were taught, how they were emphasized. So there was less memorization involved. That doesn't mean there's no memorization, but that just means there's less memorization. So you don't have to know what specifically happens in anaphase, but you do need to know the basic gist of meiosis. And this goes hand in hand with less memorization. There's more inquiry-based, more application questions involved. College Board really wants to see if you understand the information that's being taught to you and that you're just not spitting out facts. So there are four major concepts that you're going to be tested on: evolution, cell processes, genetics, and ecological interactions. And really, those are the four big ideas, so to speak. Those are where all of your questions are going to come from. So you could be asked about, DNA replication or competition and so on and so forth. So I'll just tell you a little bit about the test format here. There are 63 multiple choice questions and 6 graded questions. You have 90 minutes to answer those 69 questions. It may seem like a long time, but you really need every single minute that's given to you. Now the formulas are given to you. That's right, you have math questions. Those are your 6 graded questions. And this goes hand in hand with the less memorization thing, actually. The College Board wants to see if you can apply the correct formulas to each math question. So this is what the grading question looks like. It looks just like your SAT or PSAT math section question grading. You do it the same way. You bubble in the answer and you write it on the top. Now there's also a question called an FRQ, or a free response question. And there are 8 FRQs. They're split into long questions and short questions. There are 2 long answer questions and 6 short answer questions. And you have 80 minutes of writing time and 10-minute reading period. And I'll explain further, actually, what that means. So the writing time, 80 minutes, is basically the time that you have to actually write the answers to all of your questions. And then the 10-minute reading period is the time that you have to actually, go through each question and annotate and plan your answers. Those 10 minutes come right before the writing time. And those are really crucial because you need that time to plan out specifically what you want to write about. Because you don't have time in those 80 minutes of writing time. You don't have time to sit around and think about what you want to write. You just have to write. So I'm going to talk about the FRQ because that's a little complex here. So there are 2 long answer questions. And really, there's a lot of differences between the long answer and the short answer questions. So for example, the long answer questions are made up of multiple parts, 3 or 4 or even more parts if they want to. These long answer questions are based off a situation or a specific process like cellular respiration. So these parts may be asking about real life applications, inquiry questions, or they may just be asking if you can analyze graphs from the situation. These require lengthy answers, at least a paragraph. That's where the long came from, actually. These questions are written in a more broad way, so it's not really going to be difficult to be able to write a whole lot about each answer. If you understand the question, you'll be able to write a whole lot about it, but they're really looking for more detailed answers, for more answers, they want you to write more. That's it. The long answer questions, they expect you to write more. And after going through many review books and College Board, I've come to the conclusion that you should spend approximately 20 minutes on each of these questions. It may seem like a long time for just 2 questions, but you actually really need that time because you're going to be spending a lot of it just writing. There's so much to write in these questions that you're just going to need the time. Now, there are 6 short answer questions, and those are actually shorter. There are fewer parts in these questions, maybe only 1, 2, maybe 3 at max. And these parts require shorter answers and can be fulfilled in a few sentences. These questions are pretty much very direct as to what kind of answer they're actually asking you for. There's less real-world application questions in the short answer questions because they want you to answer the question just a couple of sentences. They're not asking for long paragraphs here. And you need to spend approximately 6 minutes on each of these questions because, again, there's not a whole lot to answer, really. Sometimes it's just, labeling a cladogram or just labeling a graph or saying, they're going to ask, describe this graph, basically. They could just ask you simple questions like that. Score distribution. Walking into this test, you must realize that you are probably taking the hardest AP test offered by the College Board. With that said, these are the score distribution for 2014. 5 is the highest score you could get. I believe it's 79% or higher. And a 3 is passing. The goal when taking an AP test is to pass it. And really, this test is hard. That's all I can say, really. You just gotta work hard for it, just gotta study hard for it. But as you can see, 35% of the people who took this test got a 3. It means they passed. And thus, a 3 is not a bad score. It's a good score. And, with 3, you can get college credit because you passed, and you can put it on your college application saying you passed. But, it's not bad. But you can see how difficult these questions are. How difficult this test is, actually, with only 6.5% of people getting a 5 on this test. But it's not impossible to do well on this test. About 63% of the people who took this test got past it. So it's difficult, but it's definitely doable. So here are some tips for the test, just from my personal experience, really. So this is going to be the multiple choice section first. Make sure your erasures are complete. This is a machine grading it, not a person. They won't know your incomplete erasure from your answer. So please, make sure they're, complete, because you don't want to make a silly mistake and lower your grade like that. This is probably the most important piece of information you should know is watch the clock. Pace yourself. You see it in all caps. That's how important it is. I cannot emphasize how important it is to pace yourself because really time is not your best friend right now. When taking this test is designed to where you're going to use all the time to answer the questions. You might even, need more time to answer these questions if you're a slow test taker. And so time is not your friend. You've definitely got to keep an eye on the clock so that way you're not spending too much time on a question. You need all the time that you have to answer these questions. And so, if you're spending more than 45 seconds on a question, you've just got to move on. You just got to move on. You don't have time. Answer every question. This is also important, is that there's no penalty for getting a question wrong, actually, on this test like the SAT. So you know what, just if you skip a question, just go back and try to guess. Try to eliminate answers and take your best shot at guessing. You just might get it right. You never know, but try to answer every question because you need every point possible. And finally, read each question carefully. In a rush, you may tend to skim over the question, and you may think that you know what it's about, but you really don't. So I suggest, reading through each question carefully, making sure that you notice the nots, the excepts, anything in bold usually. It's usually important. So you should probably, read through each question carefully so you know the question. You don't want to get it wrong because you didn't read it right. More tips for the test, but these are going to be related to the free response questions more. Continue to pace yourself. Again, I cannot emphasize enough on how much pacing is important. Even though you might know a lot about photosynthesis, and there's a question on photosynthesis, and you just really know so much, you have to hold yourself back and not write every single detail down. You need to write the main points, You got to move on because you don't want to leave a question empty. Because who knows, you could have gotten points for that maybe. And in this case, you want as many points as possible. Don't write in essay format. The prep books say essay format. It's not introduction, body, conclusion. It's just complete sentences, paragraph style. That's literally what they're asking for. So please don't write it like it's your English class because this is an AP Biology test, not an English essay. Try to get the main details in and move on. I think that's very important for the free response question. Is you can't write everything that you know. You may know a lot about certain questions, but you got to write the main details that just answer the question. You got to move on because you got to answer every single question. That's very important in this test. So you just got to try to answer every question so you can get points from everything. Now you can have visuals for answers, and some people are not even aware of this. But visuals are a great representation of an answer. If you're a more visual kind of person, go ahead and draw a graph or draw a diagram. But you can't just have a visual alone. It's actually College Board rules. You are required to have a written explanation next to those visuals. So maybe you can explain the visual or explain your answer and make reference to the visual. But by all means, I strongly suggest use a graph, use a food web, whatever helps you get your point across. And again, try to answer all the questions. These free response questions have different point values, and you don't want to miss out on a question that may have had the most points because you didn't have time to get to it. That's the worst mistake you can make. So try to make time for every single question. So I have some tools for you. Other than this PowerPoint, of course. Barron's AP Biology Review Book, latest edition. I love Barron's. Barron's is probably my favorite prep book that I would use. It also comes with great flashcards. So if you're a flashcard kind of person, get some flashcards from Barron's. Those are great. Also, I would suggest using Princeton. Maybe if you're not a Barron's person, Princeton is also great. The 2015, 2016 versions, this is what they look like. You do want to remember to get the latest edition because they may make more changes in the future. It really depends. So you want to keep update on those changes that have been made on the test so you could prepare for it well. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments or suggestions about this video, just let them know below, and I'll see you guys next week.